Hello, my name is Brian Sokinis. I'm a student at Holy Apostles College and Seminary. This is my final project for Philosophy 611, Logic and Epistemology. The topic is the epistemology of Plato and Descartes. From the title, the question may be raised as to what is epistemology? Epistemology is defined as a branch of philosophy that addresses philosophic questions about knowledge and rationality. Thus, we see that we must consider these two ideas when asking the nature of epistemology. Now that we know what epistemology is and how to define it, the question can be asked as to how one begins their search for knowledge. The answer to this question is wonder. Plato, who was a student of Socrates and teacher of Aristotle during the time of the period of schools in ancient Greece, states that philosophy begins with wonder. Now that we see Plato's interpretation of wonder, we can discuss a more particular sort of wonder, which is philosophical wonder. This type of wonder is the simple and the obvious, the close at hand. It is the obvious that appears to be the most unfathomable. We arrive at philosophical wonder when we ask the nature of things such as change, being, motion, time, space, mind, and matter. It is said that questioning these things has a career of philosophy been made. Thus, philosophical wonder can be knowledge of simple truths, truths which we would take for granted if not wondered about. Of course, this type of knowledge is what most philosophers are hoping to achieve. Without wonder, there would be no ability to philosophize, because the element of wonder before the mystery of existence is a constituent of the philosophical question, and no philosophical knowledge is possible except in the function of wonder. The first wanderer we will discuss is Plato and his work entitled Meno. In Meno, the way we acquire knowledge is addressed. It is written that the acquisition is through recollection. In the work, we see that the body and soul both exist, but do not always exist at the same time together. And so, in Plato's work, the reader finds that man does not learn, but instead he recollects his thoughts. This is so because the soul is immortal. If the soul exists before the body, it is natural to suppose that a human being can recollect what he knew before being born in a body. Considering the former, we can see the nature of soul and knowledge. Socrates considers the possibility that the soul exists separately from the body and that human beings have innate knowledge of certain matters. This knowledge is part of the soul and cannot be eliminated, only obscured by false beliefs acquired during incarnation. There is the affirmation of an immortal soul found in Meno, when it is written, "They say that the soul of man is immortal, sometimes reaching an end which men call dying, sometimes born again, but never perishing." And so, seeing then that the soul is immortal and has been born many times and has beheld all things in the world and the world beyond, there is nothing it has not learned. Thus learning and inquiry are then wholly recollection. One can see that during its existence the soul has been learning and is capable of knowing all things. It is upon incarnation with the body that the soul forgets. It is the philosopher that is up to the challenge of recollecting knowledge upon the finite body and soul existing together once again. Now the nature of incarnation can be considered. In recollection, the knowledge man possesses innately in his soul has become obscured through incarnation. This is so because the body is mortal and the soul is immortal. Thus, the soul has passed many times through incarnation, and the knowledge it has acquired needs to be recollected upon the union of soul and body. Thus, once again, the soul is eternal and knows all things and forgets only upon its union with the mortal body once again. In Meno, Socrates calls to a slave boy to prove his point of recollection. This boy has no formal education, but Socrates asks him many questions on the nature of a triangle and other geometric interpretations. The boy answered these questions correctly, thus proving Socrates' idea of knowledge recollection as true when it is agreed upon that he would know without being taught but only questioned, recovering knowledge out of himself. This proves the idea that the boy always had the knowledge and always knew it, and if he gained it at some time, he surely did not do so in his present life. Thus, we can see the theory proven, because towards the end of the topic being discussed, it is agreed upon that the boy did not learn the answers in his current life, but instead at a different time. This also proves that his soul will ever be in a state of having learned, because the soul is eternal and has already learned everything which can be learned during a different time in its existence. We can now move on to the second wanderer, René Descartes, and we will address his meditations on the first philosophy. Descartes' most famous saying is "Cognito ergo sum," which translates to "I think, therefore I am." To help prove this saying, Descartes uses the example of an evil genius. So to prove that since we think, therefore we are, the evil genius is considered as he is fooling us about reality, and he shakes the foundation of every ostensible item of knowledge, including mathematical truths. Nevertheless, even though we are being deceived, we still exist subjectively in our interpretation of reality, whether we're being fooled or not. And so we can see that we still exist in our deception. So even if I'm universally deceived, the act of being deceived is an act of thinking, and it delivers up the existence of the one who thinks and is deceived. The former idea can be seen in the Meditations on the First Philosophy when it is written, "If there is some deceiver or other who is supremely powerful and supremely sly, and who is always deliberately deceiving me, then there too is no doubt of existence if he is deceiving me, as we will exist in the deception." And so, even if we are being deceived, a subjective reality exists. Descartes' interpretation of the knowledge of his existence goes on. It is said about the mind that with the cogito renders indubitable is just that which is necessary to constitute it as cogito, and this means existence of a mind, a conscious substance. However, it does not guarantee the existence of a body. And so it can be said, the mirage of which I am deceptively aware may be unreal, but my act of being aware of it is real. So our knowledge of reality does not extend past ourselves. We have no assurance that an objective material reality exists. We're only sure of ourselves. Placing aside the idea of an evil genius deceiving us can be done when we consider clear and distinct ideas. It is with the understanding things clearly and distinctly that the result is that all the ideas that are in me, the idea that I have of God is the most true, the most clear and distinct. Examples of clear and distinct ideas are things such as 2 plus 3 equals 5, or if A then B, A therefore B. These truths are true throughout the universe. Wherever one may go, they remain true. Thus, with them, we see that God is not a deceiver, because he is most clear and distinct himself. It is through clear and distinct ideas that we can believe that God is not a deceiver. Descartes writes, "Once I perceive there is a God, and also understand at the same time that everything else depends on him, and that he is not a deceiver, I then conclude that everything that I clearly and distinctly perceive is necessarily true." We see in Descartes' work that prior to becoming aware of God, I was incapable of achieving perfect knowledge about anything else. Since God is telling us the truth of clear and distinct ideas, then he must also be telling us the truth about the objective material world outside of our subjective selves. Now that we see that there is an objective world outside of our subjective selves, we can be sure of material things. On the nature of material things existing, Descartes writes, "It remains for me to examine whether material things exist. Indeed, I now know that they can exist, at least insofar as they are the object of pure mathematics, since I clearly and distinctly perceive them." Now that we see material things can exist, we can think of the mind and body relationship. It is written in Gallagher that nothing which is given clearly and distinctly can be false. Accordingly, we can establish a general rule that all things which I perceive very clearly and distinctly are true. Since God is not a deceiver, we can believe that we are perceiving a body as a material object outside the mind. So, here we see that we can believe in the material extension of ourselves as the body, which we can now be certain exists materially. Now that we know the epistemology of both Plato and René Descartes, we can look at the similarities among the two thinkers. Moving along, we must stop and reflect on Plato's work Meno. In the work, we see that the slave boy is asked questions about geometry, things like how many sides a triangle has, as well as how many degrees make up the angles of a triangle. The boy answers these questions with ease because they exist within him. Descartes uses a similar idea when he refers to his clear and distinct ideas, for they are true ideas of things such as geometry, arithmetic, and logic. Thus, Plato has the slave boy interpret knowledge similar to Descartes' clear and distinct ideas of knowledge. Upon looking at the idea of the theory of recollection in Plato's Meno, we see great similarity in Descartes in his Meditations. Plato introduces the idea that knowledge is not learned, but is instead recollected. Descartes takes this idea and agrees with it when he writes, "It seems that I am not learning something new as recalling something I knew beforehand. It seems as though I am noticing things for the first time that were in fact in me for a long while." Thus, having written this, one can see that Descartes believes that no one is having knowledge of existence for the first time, but instead has already had knowledge of things at earlier times in their existence. To conclude, we see in Plato in his theory of recollection that the body is mortal and the soul is immortal. Thus, the soul is separate from the body prior to incarnation. The soul goes on to learn and forgets all it has learned upon the reunion of the body and the soul. Thus, the incarnate person is not learning knowledge, but instead is relearning what the soul learned while being apart from the body. Descartes believes that we certainly exist subjectively, even if reality is a deception. However, it is proven that it is not a deception because of clear and distinct ideas. These are ideas of truth that exist because of God, who is the most clear and distinct. Thus, he is telling us the truth. Descartes also thinks similar to Plato, saying that we have already learned at one time prior to whatever it is we are now learning. Thank you for your time.